Good morning, everybody. This is Reformed Orthodoxy here, and today I am reading Chapter 10, Moniek of Surviving Hitler, a Boy in the Nazi Death Camps. So without further ado, let's begin. Sometime in the fall of 1943, Jack was transferred again. Like all the other camps he had been in, this latest one was in Germany. He stood in line to get a haircut, weary with fatigue. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw someone approaching him. He was surprised to see it was a boy as young as he was. Even though the boy's head was shaved, Jack could tell he had bright red hair to go with his freckles and blue eyes. "My name is Moniek," said the boy in Polish. He smiled. "You have a name, prisoner 16,013? Jack looked at him warily. No one smiled in camp. Only rarely did they exchange names. But he liked Moniek's friendliness and was pleased he was Polish. "Yes, prisoner 13,863, he responded, looking at Moniek's number. "The name is Jack." A guard walked past them, his chest thrust out. Moniek glanced at the guard in the tower, made sure he was not watching, and then thrust out his own chest in hilarious imitation. Jack laughed, surprised by the sound. When he had last laughed, Moniek filled Jack in on the way the camp operated. So, which guards were sadistic and which were not, and which ones weren't so bad. By the time they reached the front of the line, Jack knew that Moniek was from the town of Walbrum in southern Poland. He had been in the camp since 1940, over 3 years now. Almost twice as long as Jack. He was 18, a little over a year older than Jack. Like Mama, Jacob, and Jack, Moniek had been put in a ghetto. When the Nazis deported the Jews, Moniek had been separated from his parents, 2 brothers and sisters. Like Jack, he was determined to reunite with his family after the war. Also like Jack, he had been in a series of camps. Sometimes, though not in this one, he worked as a carpenter, a skill for which he had no training. When I came into one camp, I met some guys from my hometown. They told me a carpenter just died, and they said that when it was announced that roll call, a carpenter was needed, I should step forward, because that work had been easier than other things. So I did. Moniek winked at Jack and lowered his voice to whisper, "But I knew nothing about carpentry. But I caught on fast enough that the Dummkampf FSS never knew the difference. Work less and conserve energy. That way you'll live long." Jack had always done the opposite, work hard. Lately, he no longer thought it was possible to live a long life. No Jew could survive Hitler. New tales told tales of mass slaughter. Everyone now knew that the stories of the gas chambers were now true. Because the camps were overflowing with prisoners, the officers held more frequent selections, weeding out the weaker men who would be taken to the gas chambers, and from there the crematorium, which were now operating in most camps. All these horrors weighed heavily on Jack. He wondered how God could allow these atrocities to happen, but Moniek refused to dwell on such things. "Better not think about it, Jack. If you question why, you won't survive this. Only think of this moment and the future," he said as he shared a small piece of bread from his pocket. "There's always reason to hope." The next morning, they lined up together at roll call so they could be sent on the same work detail. That evening, they waited in the food line together. The food here was awful as everywhere else, but with Moniek around, this seemed even more bearable. Even this seemed more bearable. Sorry, I can't frickin' read today. I'm sorry. He was always clowning around. He had a smile and a joke for every occasion. To Jack's amazement, even when the guards overheard him, they did nothing. Once he even saw guards smile at something Moniek did. "You're too serious, Jack," Moniek would often tell him. Then he would do something that would make Jack laugh. Gradually, Jack felt his mood of despair lift. Moniek could actually make him feel lighthearted, and it was helping him. One cold day, the boys were ordered to scrub the floor of the SS food supply. A guard took them in and stood over them with a gun. Jack looked around the shed with wonder. It was like a treasure vault. On the shelves were 1-pound blocks of butter, tightly wrapped in protective paper, and rows of marmalade jars. He could feel Monique's excitement, though they dared not speak. Of course, they had to try to steal something. They were starving after all, and the SS would never miss the little they could take. But if they were caught, I quickly reasoned that more than food was at stake here, Jack said. They had stolen so much from us, our homes, our families, our very identities. To take something from them gave us strength. As they started to scrub the black slate floor, Monique communicated through gestures that he had a plan. Using his eyes and covertly pointing with his fingers, he let Jack know he would distract the guard while Jack grabbed something and slipped it into the bucket, where it would be hidden by the scrub rag in the murky water. Jack nodded. He hoped he was brave enough to go through with it. On signal, Monique asked the guard where they should empty the buckets and get fresh water. As the guard pointed to the outside pump, Jack slipped a pound of wrapped butter into the bucket. He knew if he accidentally dropped the bucket, he'd be shot on the spot. Carefully, he picked up the bucket and went outside. So far, so good. He was not visible from the guard tower. He frantically looked around for a hiding spot and spotted an opening in a stack of wood, and hurriedly slipped the butter in and moved the wood so the butter wouldn't show. Back inside, he used gestures to let Monique know where the hiding place was. A short time later, Monique took his bucket out with a jar of marmalade in it. That night before lights out, they sneaked back and retrieved the butter and jam. In the morning, they shared these wonderful treats with several friends as they ate their daily ration of sawdust-filled bread. Was this worth risking our lives for? Perhaps not, Jack said, recalling the incident. But we would try to get food. You could not stay alive on what they fed you. By the beginning of 1944, conditions in the camps got even worse. Monique and I were starving, just like everybody else. Once again, Jack's April birthday passed unnoticed. He was now 17. Rumors were rampant in the camps that the American troops were gaining ground in Europe. In May of 1944, Hitler ordered that all Jews in Hungary be deported to camps, crowding them so much that the conditions became even more intolerable. Prisoners died of disease and starvation in ever greater numbers. The crematoriums operated round the clock. Selections during roll call to eliminate the weakest and most unhealthy prisoners became even more frequent. We would stuff paper in our mouths and rub our cheeks to make us look more healthy, Jack said. I thought back to how our young housekeeper in Gedinga rubbed her cheeks with red paper to look pretty. Now I try to make my cheeks red so I could live another day. This picture shows Hungarian Jews in the concentration camps. The caption reads, with hundreds of thousands of Hungarians were deported to the concentration camps, many were overcrowded. Sorry, I meant to say when. I can't read or speak to save my life. I'm sorry. Both Jack and Monique were growing weaker. On work detail, they constantly stayed alert, watching for anything edible they could slip into their pockets and then share that night. You never saw grass in a concentration camp because the prisoners ate it, Jack said. Monique was assigned to help repair the kennels while the dogs so feared by the prisoners were out on patrol. He found a dog biscuit and a couple bones in one of the empty kettles. We dined well that night, Jack remembered. With so many prisoners dying, disposal of bodies was a big problem. Jack and Monique were briefly in a camp that had no crematorium. They were assigned to a one-day work deal to load corpses into a truck and then throw them off a truck into a common grave outside the camp. The boys tried not to look at their faces. Most of the men died of starvation. Their mouths were frozen in an expression of horror, and even teenagers looked like old men. Monique had no jokes that day. For Jack, the experience was a low point. I suddenly thought, who's going to throw me off that truck? I didn't share this even with Moniek. Deep down, I always believed I would somehow survive, but on this day, and that wasn't even the worst job I had. The worst was when I had to stand in a ditch filled with icy water up to my waist. We were supposed to make the ditch deeper. Day after day, we stood there in that freezing mess. No underwear, no socks, no coats, no gloves, sleet falling on us, trying to dig out the heavy water-soaked dirt. That was the worst work. When I was throwing those bodies off the truck, I knew their suffering at least was over. At that moment, I felt they were the lucky ones. And on Wednesday, we will read Chapter 11, The Miracle. Have a good day. God bless.